Hi, welcome to Module 6, where we are looking at Eysenck, Cattell, and the various trait theorists. So, in the chapter that we're not covering, it discusses Gordon Allport, who was the first trait theorist. So, like I said, you don't have to read this chapter, but just to give you a little bit of background, he's the first person who looked at personality in the same common folk way of just describing somebody, a series of traits that describe someone, just so a bunch of adjectives basically. Um, and then this chapter focuses on how that theory became more scientific. So we start by discussing Raymond Cattell, who was one of the first people to really put this trait idea to the scientific test. So he used something called factor analysis, which is a statistical procedure to look at all these thousands of different adjectives that people can use to describe somebody and figure out if, when you statistically analyze them, if they can be grouped into a bunch of similar things, right? So if you said somebody was happy and if you said they were joyous, right, does that not group onto the same kind of quality? So he did that and he came up with 16. So as you read that section, you can see how he came up with the 16 PF, or the 16 personality factor, and how somebody can be classified that way with different personality tests. And I believe there is one. I have a link to one of them in this module. So then we move on to looking at Hans Eysenck. So although he sort of talks about traits, he was more specific in looking at three different types. So it wasn't based on statistical analysis. His theories were more influenced by some of the other people we've already discussed. So this is where Carl Jung makes a bit of a comeback, and the stuff that he had proposed around introversion, extroversion, etc. Eysenck included into these three personality types. And then the question of, well, just how many personality types or traits are there continues. And in the 80s, the five-factor personality model was proposed. And this is where they said, well, when we do our analysis, we don't get 16, we get 5. Here are the big 5. And for a long time, the big 5 dominated most of the theories. However, not to be undone, apparently it's now 6. So the chapter kind of ends with the hexaco model, or the idea that there's actually 6 different types of personality, which is basically 5, the same 5, plus one more, looking at honesty, which is a really neat idea and may have been something that was missed from the previous models. And then finally, we end by looking at this dark triad. What about evil personality? What about the negative side? Where most of what we had been discussing up until now was fairly optimistic on the positive side of humanity. So consider all of these theories as you read through this section, as well as the discussion question, which is asking just how many traits or types are there, and the fact that some come up with a different number than others. Does that mean that there are some that are more valid than others? So just keep those things in mind as you read through the section. Enjoy!